among.
He said it'd be good if you got
All right, good evening, everyone.
had two different book types.
Thanks for joining us. I'd like to call the May 17th Committee of the Whole meeting to order. All trustees are here, along with George Schaefer. George, do you have anything to give the audience as far as how things
We
are?
have 4 items on the agenda. We're going to start with the 2 finance items and try to get through those pretty quick. We do have several people on via Zoom. There's 17 total, about half staff, but we do have some folks from the developer, the petitioner, and some residents in the area for the last 2 items. But there will be a time to speak at those items. We will use the raise your hand feature if you want to speak, and I'll unmute you and you can speak. Then later on in the meeting, there will be a time for open Q&A if you wanted to go that route. So,
George, real quick, you want to share, how do you raise your hand, just so everyone knows?
yeah, so at the bottom of the, if you go to participants, you can click more and you can do raise your hand there. Where's my button? You can click on your own name and you can do raise your hand.
Okay.
Or you can.
Probably on the bottom right, George, where that 17 is.
What was that?
Probably over there where that 17 is. I thought you were looking for it.
Correct, no. But no, we'll call people up, and then if I'm not calling you, you can always unmute yourself and just politely say that you're ready to speak.
Okay, got it. All right, so 4 main topics. First one, the 2021 budget amendment.
Yeah, I'll turn this over to Chris here. This is a follow-up from our item, last committee of the whole meeting. This is a bit of a cleanup item. We're trying to close the books for last fiscal year, get it to the auditors so they can put together their, staff does most of it, the auditors check the work, right, Chris? But this is an opportunity where we had all good news. We had a surplus that ended the year. The last month was a little bit early because we still had some bills to pay, but we are going to have a surplus. We know how much. But Chris wanted to go through and a couple things. We have options for the surplus. We can put it back in fund balance, but we're already above our targets. We do have other obligations, and we've come up with a way to hedge our bets a little bit, put some money towards our buildings, our police pension, and some other needs. So I will turn it over to you, Chris, and try to move the slides.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I start with the budget amendment, I do want to go over just an update on the American Rescue Plan. Basically, we talked about it a little bit, but I have a little more information. I said that before that the village is estimated about 2.1 million. The first installment is going to be 50%. We should receive it end of May, early June. On May 10th, the U.S. Treasury released additional guidance. So basically, Darshana and I have been on a lot of calls to see, because a lot of the guidance is, of course, reporting issues, certifications. We have to be certified in order to receive the funds. So there's a lot of guidance in there. So on May 10th, they released it. And then a lot of organizations, they're giving us free training on the guidelines and to ensure that we can use, that we have the auditors are all in place, and that we basically invest it where we're supposed to, and just basically we're following everything. There's been some talk where people are a little scared because it goes to the state and then the state will give it to us. But in the guidelines, it does state the state cannot restrict municipalities on the funding nor the use. The Treasury will give us what we can use it for. The state cannot further restrict that. So this, plus on top of it, they can't hold it. They can hold it for, I believe, like 30 days longer, but they can't hold it for a really long time and not give it to us for like 6 months. They can't do that. The funds do need to be spent by 2024, and there are a lot of reporting requirements. And like I said before, they always said that you can't use it for pension. The other issue that they just said right now is if you used any rainy day funds to during the pandemic, they're not going to let us replenish any of the rainy day funds. We haven't had that issue, but there are other agencies that had that issue. So that was one of them. Okay, now to the budget amendment. Before I even start, I know this is a $1 million amendment here with and the revenues were higher than anticipated. But I do want to say that when I looked at the, and this is before any accruals, but the revenues are about 105%. So 5% over than what I budgeted. And the expenditures are about at 95, 96, depending. We have a couple of accruals. So yes, this is a large budget amendment. However, if you really look at it and break it down, we're really spending what we're supposed to. 96% is really close. And we're a little bit higher because we thought with the pandemic, we thought sales tax and local use tax are going to go down. But, there's been a lot of stimulus money where people are actually purchasing. So I haven't changed anything about any of the revenues from the last. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I really haven't. On the expenditures, we went back and we looked at it. And I said before, there's a couple, the TIF funds are not doing nearly, the TIF funds and the parking garage fund is really not doing, they're underwater. They're not doing what they're supposed to as of yet. We're not receiving increment on the TIFs. So we do have to transfer money to those. The Main and Archer, the I&M TIF, the parking garage fund, and the TOD TIF. Those are the ones we really have to, because they are negative cash right now. So we do have to support them. The other two items that we talked about before were the police pension and the maintenance fund for building repairs. So the police pension, we're proposing now to lower it and just give them $300,000 in additional funding. Now, this is on top of what we already given them. And I believe the levy this past last year was $867,000. So it's $300,000 in addition. And then we will transfer $260,000 to the maintenance fund for building repairs. And that should cover some of the expenditures for the roof this year and for any additional. We have budgeted for next year an additional 200,000. So that maintenance fund is going to start to build up for future repairs that we have. And then on the other funds, basically, I really didn't change any. I do want to say on the IMRF and the Social Security one, those are self-supporting. We're not transferring any money there. It's just the expenditures. I should have caught it. It was a little bit too low. And when I calculate the position budgeting and I do every single position, the IMRF, the overtime did not hit the IMRF expenditures. So, but the fund has the money in it. We don't have to, nobody has to support it. So the fund does have the money and the Social Security as well. So those are basically just to clean it up on that. The other ones are really to recognize the revenues, and the debt service is because we did some bond refunding. And so we always have to recognize it and then do it in an escrow. So that's basically in a nutshell, a follow-up. Does anybody have any questions?
Chris, real quick. So an outsider looking in would say, oh my goodness, $1 million. We got an extra $1 million this year, but it's not like we don't have liabilities on the books, correct? I mean, we're trying to eat in to a piece of our pension liability. We paid what, 800,000. This is additional 300. We're paying between 1.1 and 1.2 million against the pensions, but also on the books. And I think the pensions are what, 10 to 12 million as of last year?
Between both of them, between IMRF and the police pension last year was around $10 million. You are, yes, correct.
10 million. And then the big whopper is our long-term debt, which is on our books as well.
Yes.
And what's that in the neighborhood of?
Probably around 22, 24 million around that.
Yeah, I was thinking it was in the mid 30s. So this is a great thing that we have $1 million, but it's not like it's $1 million of, money. I mean, we have, and we're trying to pay down our long-term debt. So I just wanted to put that out there as a point of reference.
Well, and I also want to put out too, because, what missed budgeting or anything like that. Like I said, we came in 96% of expenditures. That's really, really good, 96%. And then 5% over in revenues. It's not all between revenues and expenditures. We did a real good job on that.
I appreciate, you use a level of conservatism, so we're not going the other way. It's not like we're scrambling to find $1 million. If anything, you underestimate revenues, overestimate expenses. And if we come into the favor, then we're obviously able to do things with this extra money. We did a great job of expenses, like you said. So again, great job, and commend your forecasting, because again, we like these surprises, not the other ones.
Yes, thank you. Yep, I do too.
And the building maintenance just gives us a little bit more of a cushion going into this year. We don't have quotes yet back. We're going to we're going to be getting those back soon for the roof. The village hall and the police department need a new roof. And there's also some heating and cooling upgrades potential. We don't have to make that decision today. We're just putting money away so we could make that decision when we have more information.
Chris, I have a question. Do we have any bonds falling off this year?
I don't believe so. I would have to get back to you on that. I think it's one more year because we did do a refunding of one of them. I believe it's one more year, but I don't know from the top. I'll let you know on that. I'll shoot you an email on that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on the budget?
There's one other item you might want to, Chris, you got to keep an eye. I know the Illinois representatives are still pushing in Washington to be allowed to use this relief money that they're getting for pensions and for paying off governmental debt. So if that were to happen, we might want to have a secondary game plan of what we want to do. So, Durbin, it was just on the news this past weekend, so I know they're still pushing for it, so.
Yes. So,
State will only need 150 billion.
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
Every little bit helps though, John. This is more about the city of Chicago.
Got it.
Okay. Okay.
All right, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
All right, next up, moving along, the electric aggregation contract.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Chris here soon, but we had, this has been a partnership we've had with the Will County Governmental League for the last, I think, 5 to 7 years. You go back even a little bit longer. The state allowed for the deregulation of the electric supply industry, which allowed more companies to get involved than just ComEd. When that happened, many towns started to aggregate their residential accounts. What that means is we have about 6,000 households in Lamont. We put them together. We have an option to put them together and go out to market and basically get a bid for the supply of electric for all of the town. Now, the transmission will always be with ComEd. That'll never change. If you recall, it's just the supply portion of your bill. There's a lot of companies that go out and individually target or market individual homeowners. This is an opportunity to put it together. The program was really successful for a few years, was seeing significant savings. I mean, you're talking $20-30 a month at one point. It's since the market has corrected itself and ComEd has been very competitive with the other suppliers. So it does beg a question whether or not we want to continue it. Will County, the Will County Government will not be moving forward with a structured program, but an option would be to utilize our existing consultant, or that existing consultant already been vetted. We've interviewed over the years, done a great job for us to either aggregate our accounts or work with a larger group. So Chris, you want to just talk a little bit about just the obligation or the communication we have to get back to Will County by the end of the month and then the next steps.
Yeah, so Will County DACOT communities in Will County to see if who still wants to participate.
You're breaking out, Chris. I'll jump in and see if you can get your connection. So we have a couple options. We could go back out and interview consultants and just work with our existing residents and kind of bundle 6,000 accounts, go out to the market, or we can get back together with other Will County communities using DACOT as a consultant, with the caveat that even if we went with a program, if ComEd ever drops below our negotiated or bidded rate, residents can always just opt out and go back to ComEd with no penalty.
I think ComEd is a little lower now.
ComEd right now is lower, and we've communicated that to the public. Very few people have switched. It's a convenience thing as well, because you're not talking At this point, you're talking pennies a month, not dollars, lower. So most have just stayed in our program just for convenience and.
I guess, looking through the paperwork we had on this, the question, cost benefit relationship here. I mean, understanding that it makes the most sense to go with the consultant who has already been vetted, but what are we paying the consultant? How do they get paid? And what the notes say is that we enjoyed a savings and a reduced effort, but how much? So how does that relate to what it costs? Those numbers I don't have. So for me, the question makes sense, provided there's a cost benefit relationship.
Well, I think at this point, because we can have the consultant here and talk a little bit about their process. I guess they don't know the true cost until they go out to the market. Now, they do know their rate.
What is their cost though? Not the cost of the energy, but the consultant cost.
Do we pay?
What is that?
No.
Yes. Well, we would.
Through the-
Will County they won't. So if we team up with a group of other towns, then we will form a conglomerate to go negotiate with DACOT. But they're in it, they're consultants. So what is their fee? I don't know what that is.
And how long is comment lower than our current rate?
It's been a couple of years.
Couple of more than
Where's it been lower?
Basically, our rate is like 7.5 cents and ComEd, I think, is 7 cents.
Yeah, now ComEd has additional, it is confusing because ComEd has additional charges that our rate does not have, so it's closer than that.
Closer than that, when we figure the charges in.
But if we've been at a year where we haven't been able to get a savings, shouldn't we just revisit this in like 3 months or 6 months?
Well, actually, we've been doing it for 10 years. And I think it was the first 5 or 6 was always lower to go
Pretty significant, actually.
away from Edison. I don't know what the end result was though.
No, but what I'm saying is so it's gonna expire, right, this year?
Correct, October.
Okay, so,
It does every year though, Dave. And
no, I know, I remember us renewing it, but,
Yeah.
but last year when we had the conversation, the comment rate wasn't lower than our negotiated rate. And basically since then, the comment's been lower.
I think it was lower last year too.
I think it was lower last year, too.
It was very close, but it was,
But I'm saying if over the last year, if we haven't seen any benefit whatsoever of negotiating it, shouldn't we just bring this up in 6 months?
Other than consistency of your bill, because ComEd, their rate changes every 3 to 6 months and our
Right.
rate stays.
Right, but all of our residents are saving, I mean, it comes down to not seeing numbers. I'm just saying, it seems like a waste of time to save pennies or spend a couple extra pennies. It seems like a waste of our time.
and my point is, no matter what we pay for the cost of the utility, we're
Yeah.
still gonna have the cost of the consultant. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So we got to overcome both the difference in the utility cost plus the cost of the consultant, whatever that is.
I'm back. I apologize. The consultant's cost is basically given to the residents. So it's none, basically, once we negotiate this contract, it's really not on ours, and it's not on ours at all. It's consultant.
Through the rate.
But it is on the rate, Chris, and that's all.
Correct. It is on the
So we have to have a net savings to the cost of the consultant plus the energy to overcome whatever the difference is between those two numbers and Edison. That's all.
But I do have to say too, if it goes up, the residents can leave at any time. The residents kind of like that, and it's on their ComEd bill, so it's not like they are receiving two bills.
Right.
They can leave anytime if they feel like it's over. If we give them 6 months of savings and we just have to basically, have this consultant do, and they get 6 months of savings, it's better than, 0.
So basically, the reason why we sign this contract or we use Will County or we want to use this contractor going forward is that it'll be a lower price for all of our residents and potentially. And B, it gives them consistency, right? It's not a fluctuating. So I guess, are we concerned that it's going to be a higher price than ComEd, right? I mean, that's what we're.
And it's been a higher price over the last.
But then the resident will still have the option of going back to ComEd.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, yeah, that's what we should look
That's what
at.
they just said.
But
They
some
just
people
said
do
this.
like to have that consistent
Yeah.
bill, and
Yeah.
and no.
But it's not, well, the rate, you mean, the
Right.
consistent rate.
So that they know.
The rate goes, ComEd changes every 6 months.
George says that there's some extra charges by ComEd that aren't figured in this.
Yeah.
But it still was lower. You guys said it was still lower. I mean, I don't know the
Yeah,
numbers, right?
for a year, for a couple of years. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We got to look at the number. I mean, if it's slightly higher and you have this consistency and you have the ability for it to be lower because it's lower for 6 straight years, then
Correct. And they could.
Or if it's been
I mean, they could go to bid
significantly-
and it could be lower and then 6 months later, ComEd could drop below
Yeah.
it. You know, so that's the problem, you know. But we could see what they're.
just have the consultant,
They keep ComEd's low.
yeah.
A lot of people switch over to ComEd and
There could be other reasons why Edison is lower the last couple of years.
Yeah, ComEd doesn't have a good reputation right now, so.
No,
And I don't-
our consultant did say that ComEd is looking to raise their prices or asking for some federal authority to raise their prices. So, but like I said, this really is to benefit our residents and, you know,
150 million.
and they can opt in and out. So it's not like we're telling them they have to have this. This gives them another option. So, and if it's really not that much work on our end, and if it gives them another option, they can do it. And if they don't, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna play devil's advocate on this. We're saying that they can opt out, but I'm assuming the average person isn't going in and looking at their bill saying, oh, I should have opted out this month. Or I'm gonna go opt out this month. I mean, I'm pretty good with my bills and John, I don't know, are you looking at your bill to see if you're saving money by this contract? I'm not
I think it's,
necessarily
yeah, I mean,
looking at it.
no, I got you.
So we still have to be responsible stewards if we're representing our citizens, not just to be consistent, but if for 2 years it's been lower, staying with ComEd.
But we don't know, hasn't
Well,
it?
I thought they're saying it has though.
Yeah, by pennies, but it fluctuates every.
Over the past 10 years, we've saved residents a lot of money.
Yeah.
We had.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about materiality, right? So let's just find out what that delta's been with the all-in cost. Have that consultant do
Okay.
that. And if it gives us consistency and even when we did pay more, you know, was it materially more than when we made all those savings? So
Why is Will County getting out of it? That's what kind of surprises me. If, you know, it's been successful, they had a lot of communities in, why are they dropping being our representative?
You know, a lot of it is the benefits of the program, you know, are outweighed by the cost of their staff, you know, doing this every year. Versus really at this point, a consultant could just work directly with us. We don't have to go with Will County Communities. We could just do our own program, aggregate our own residents, then make a decision. Or we can do it with the extra buying power of Will County. Those are really-
I'm good with all of it. I just want to know how much.
I mean, to your point, Dave, I agree with you, but if there was a significant, it sounds like it was probably a pennies type of delta. If it was material, people would be on the phone, I'm sure, or people would be on Facebook like, hey, why are we paying this when we could be paying something less? So if it ever did get to a big delta, we would say, hey, opt out.
We've told people to opt out.
Yeah.
that's how it was when we first got on. It was quite a savings.
Yeah, it was.
Significant.
Yeah, and I remember that as well. I think it's made a comment competitive as it did, right?
Now, almost regularly, a couple of times a month, from different suppliers, you know, they say, oh, switch over, it's this, yeah. And then you go to the fine print and you read, it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour, where we're paying 7.5.
When, yeah. So anyway, what you were asking for is if we concur, you'd reach out to them and get the process started. I think that's
Yeah,
a good
they
idea.
need to-
Let's find out, where are we? What's transpired over the last 10 years and how much is the cost going forward? That's really all we need.
Okay. Yeah, we do have to let them know by the end of the month. So I will, I'll put it together and send it out to everybody. And then maybe we can, put it on the agenda I know it's a voting agenda, but we can put it on the agenda for next week, if that's okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right.
And we're not saying we're doing it, we're just saying present it to us. We'll have another vote to say if we want to use the aggregator, right?
Correct. What I'll do is we don't have to, but I'll put a resolution on together and then present all the costs, and then you vote on the resolution, and if it costs too much, then you vote no to the resolution.
Yep.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, fence variation. Mark, are you taking this?
I am. Let me pull up the PowerPoint. So, good evening, everyone. So with this case, this is a fence variation request at 13370 Bond Circle, which is in the Kettering subdivision. The applicants are the homeowners, Scott and Brooke Pijor, and they are actually in requesting two variations related to our fence regulations for open fences. One is to increase the height from a maximum of 4 feet to 5 feet. And the other is with open fences, the regulation is for these open decorative fences that they, in the corner yard, be 20 feet from the street. In this case, they're asking the fence run along their property line. So that would be 16.5 feet from the street. A little bit of information here. On the left is a sample picture of the type of fencing more or less they're going to be putting in, which is the requirement by the association in Kettering. So all of the fences in Kettering are of the similar style. And on the right, you see the Plata survey that they've drawn in showing where they want to put the fence. So just a real quick walkthrough with the zoning regulations, and I did touch on it a second ago. There's actually essentially two sets of regulation. One is for, it would allow a 6-foot privacy fence, for example. But and that's what's shown in red on the image on the right. Under that set of regulations, though, and again, their association wouldn't allow a 6-foot privacy fence, but our code would. It wouldn't be allowed, though, in the corner yard past the corner setback line. And in this case, for this lot in Kettering, that's 22.5 feet. So you can see the dotted red line in the corner yard. That would be, actually, they could put the fence there by right now. Then we allow these open decorative fences, and we do allow them in the front and corner yards, provided they're no more than 4 feet in height and that they're 20 feet away from the street. And that's what's illustrated by this, and it may be kind of hard to see, green line showing the 20 feet distance from the street. And again, they could, by right, do a 4-foot open fence 20 feet from the street and just come in for permit. And again, this blue line then would illustrate their proposal, which again is right up against the property line, only 16.5 feet from the street. I kind of walk through a couple of more things here. We have standards for variations related to the general purpose intent of the UDO, the unique circumstances and strict enforcement of the code result in hardships and would not alter the essential character of the locality and not be detrimental to adjacent property. So one thing to note with the subject property, our code doesn't really make a distinction between different types of corner lots. It's a corner lot's a corner lot, but in reality, there are differences. And as you can see on the top of the screen, what's shown in the red circle is we have these back-to-back corner lots, and that's what this property is, as opposed to a reversed corner lot, which is shown in the bottom. And in a reversed corner lot, their corner yard is next to somebody else's front yard, right? Where in this case, their corner yard is next to somebody else's corner yard. And that is a pretty important distinction because, you want to maintain the streetscape and the sort of general setback in the front yard. So with a reversed corner yard being next to somebody else's front yard, you want to, that's something that you really want to be careful about. In the case of a back-to-back situation, there's potentially a little bit more room for leeway there. And then the bottom left corner of your screen, if you may recall, last year we did have a similar fence variation request in Kettering for a 5-foot fence in a corner lot that was approved last May, essentially a year ago. And they, of course, do have their fence installed, and this is a photograph showing it. And you can, with them, it was a 5-foot fence. That was what the variance was for, but they were maintaining that 20-foot distance. So that's one difference between that request and this request. Here's some photographs just of the corner kind of toward the rear property of the subject property. Again, it kind of shows that it's a back-to-back corner situation. So you can see how it's next to their neighbors to the south, their corner yard. And there's, some slight topographic slope here as well. So just in short, staff is recommending in favor of the 5-foot height, but that the fence should still be 20 feet from the street. So in other words, their second variation request to only go 16.5 feet from the street, staff does not support. This item went to a public hearing at the May 5th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. There was general discussion, much as I've alluded to, regarding primarily on that distance requirement. The PZC was comfortable with the 5-foot height, but did want the sort of 20-foot quote open parkway area should be maintained, and had some concern with the fence being so close to the sidewalk, and also concerned about consistency and uniformity, because one thing we wouldn't want is sort of this fence being only 16.5 feet from the property line. And if the neighbor came in to do a fence, they would have to come in for a variance to align their fence then, because the code doesn't allow it. So there was some concern about that. And the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of the case unanimously, but based on staff's conditions, which are again shown on the screen. And again, that supports the variation allowing the 5-foot open fence, but does not support the 16.5-foot distance from the street. We would want the 20-foot distance from the street. I do believe that the applicants are here as well, the property owners, and they can obviously further comment on this. And I, of course, can answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
You're muted. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. I got 2 quick questions. So we have a couple of staff recommendations. One is going, it sounds like the applicants, is it Scott and Brooke? Are they on?
Yes. and
Scott's
Brooke-
on.
Brooke has their hand up too.
Oh, okay. Scott, Brooke, good evening. Quick question for both of you. Do any of the neighbors have an issue with this? I read that the HOA does not. Just want to clarify that with both of you. And are you guys okay with reducing it from 16 to 20?
So we are asking to still keep it at the 20. We appreciate all the work that Mark did. From our point of view, aesthetically speaking, having a fence 3.5 feet in on your yard, even if, as you saw in the last picture, is a little, to me, is a little silly. I've never seen that before. I understand that, codes are in place for a reason. I know in the meeting, some of the arguments, like Mark pointed out, if the neighbor behind us wants a fence and they have to come in to get variation as well. To me, I guess I don't see that being really a valid reason on why we shouldn't be allowed to do it, just because they don't want to have to do it for my neighbor behind us. Again, for us, it's more of a, how do I put this? Kind of a, common sense for us in terms of, I get it. Maybe you don't want it, literally touching the concrete sidewalk, but, having it 6 inches off or something like that's a lot more visually appealing than having this big, basically wasted yard, just because of code. And I know in speaking with them at the PCC meeting, there have been some other requests for the 5-foot fence. I know they even mentioned about even redoing the code because there were so many, it just made sense.
Yeah, you still there?
To clarify, the fence would have to be at least a foot off the sidewalk anyways, because their property line doesn't go to the sidewalk. And the UDO discussion amendment the PZC had was, for the potential 5-foot height. But again, the PZC was not comfortable with adjusting the 20-foot requirement.
Scott, how about, does the HOA or any of your neighbors have an issue with your request? Was there a formal meeting you had with the HOA on this?
So we did receive approval from the HOA. We did have our sign per the village out as well for all of our neighbors to see. Yeah, we sent all the letters to each individual home within, I think it was like 250 feet. We're lucky enough to be in this neighborhood. We got really great neighbors that we're friends with everybody around us. We spoke with them to make sure that they were comfortable before we did anything, only because, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. Us being a young family, plan on being here for a really long time. So the only pushback we've really gotten is from PZC.
Quick question for Mark. Mark, you said there's and I recalled the other petition as well. What did we grant on the other petition? Because this was in the same neighborhood.
Correct. So that was at 13691 Kettering. And their request was for the 5-foot height in the corner yard, but they had it so that the fence was 20 feet away from the street. So in essence, again, with the open fence, there's the code is 4-foot height, 20 feet from the street. Someone does that with an open fence, they can just come in for a permit and not have to go through this process. The case last year was only varying the height and not the distance.
Got it.
So they made this consistent.
They go off of the building, then they can go to 6 feet, and it doesn't have to be an open fence either.
Yes, then that's correct. Their association wouldn't allow, I don't believe that, but our code would.
Our code would though, yes.
Correct.
Personally, I agree with the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't think anybody wants to walk down the sidewalk with a fence right next to them. And if the people have a dog and a dog comes barking at you and you got kids, you want a little bit of distance off the sidewalk. And right now their backyard is 78 feet, more than 78 feet wide. It would bring it down to 75 feet. So they've got plenty of room. And if you would go by the old code, it would have had to been 25 feet off the sidewalk. We reduced that, so give people more room, but I just don't like a fence right along the sidewalk.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Ron as well. You don't want a fence. You don't want shrubs on the sidewalk. You don't want a fence. I think there's a safety thing.
Catering sites.
A lot of sites. I agree with staff's recommendation.
I do too.
Any other comments?
I think it's a good compromise for the staff to give in and to give them the 20 feet. So it's
Okay.
not much wrong on this one.
Me too. 5 foot and 20.
So Scott and Brooke, this will go in front of the board meeting, correct? And will we vote on 20 feet or will we vote on the
16.
the 16?
But it depends on how they
I
come
mean,
in. If
yeah.
they still come in and say they want us to vote on the
Yeah, how is,
Yeah, my thought on that, if the applicants want us to do that, we would actually probably want to prepare 2 different ordinances, one a variation granting them the height, and then another variation ordinance with the location, and you would take 2 separate votes.
okay. So they can still get the fence at the 5-foot height, but potentially we would vote on the 16 verse 20.
Again, I mean, we need to do both. So we need an ordinance giving the variation for the height from 4 feet to 5 feet, and an ordinance for the location from 20 feet to the 16 and a half feet.
Got it. Yeah, I just want to make sure it wasn't an all or nothing. So it's two separate ordinances.
I mean, yeah, you could write it, and we have written ordinances where we've had multiple variations in one ordinance, and then it does become an all or nothing situation, which in this situation where it, staff, planning and zoning, and it sounds like the board is in favor of one variation and not the other, we don't want to do that because that would be counterproductive.
Got it. All right. Any other questions or comments, Scott or Brooke?
I mean, I guess, thank everybody for your time. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like you guys are recommending it. So, I mean, I guess unfortunately, at this point, I guess it is what it is.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Brooke. All right. Next up, we have the Mary Ellen Woods rezoning.
Correct. So with this request, the Mary Ellen Woods, which is located at 3 West Roberta, as shown on the screen, it's on the northwest corner of Walter and Roberta. And the request here is a rezoning request with a final plat of subdivision. And the request would be to allow for a 9-lot detached single-family development. The applicant is Phil Cullen, acting on behalf of the Amy Ellen Group LLC. The existing zoning of the property is R4, and it is generally surrounded by, and I have an exhibit showing this, but R4 with some R4A to the east. The request would be to rezone it to our relatively new R5A single-family zoning district. Just so you can see, here's the proposed plat of subdivision. The request would involve having 6 single-family detached lots along Roberta Street, and then the other 3 fronting Walter, with a large portion of the site being dedicated to Outlot A there due to topographic concerns and also wetlands and those sorts of concerns. And also just kind of showing from a tree preservation perspective, the areas outlined in orange would need to be cleared by the applicant to allow for the construction of the homes and the necessary grading. An area for cleaning, so kind of going through and not necessarily completely removing everything, but kind of going through the area. That's what's shown in yellow. And they do propose to preserve the vegetation as is in these areas noted as preservation area 1 and 2 highlighted in green. The village's comprehensive plan has the property designated as infill residential. So this is noted as areas that are already in existing residential neighborhoods, and that any new development proposed would be consistent with the established character of the existing neighborhoods. The comp plan also has some additional items in it, generally speaking to allowing for more infill development, allowing for development on smaller family lots as well. And we sort of address this through the creation of the R5A zoning district in part. As you can see, as I noted, the existing zoning in the area. And one thing, I'm not going to read these descriptions, but one thing specifically I do want to note with the proposed R5A, as you may recall, within the last 6 months or so, we did amend the code. Duplexes are no longer permitted by right in the R5A zoning district. They are a special use, and townhomes and apartments are specifically prohibited. So if the property were to be rezoned to R5A, but for some reason this development does not occur, and someone did decide to put some duplexes there, it's a completely different request that would go through the process again, necessitates a new public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we would, of course, evaluate that with our comprehensive plan. And as I noted, the infill development, which is this area, needs to fit the established character of the neighborhood, which duplexes would likely not. And the one thing to note again is trying to fit that established character of the neighborhood. With the R5A zoning, we allow lots of 10,000 square feet and with a lot width of 75 feet. The existing homes in the area, a lot of them, especially to the south, while they're zoned R4, do not conform with the R4 regulations in the code. So you can see that the lots to the south are narrower lots. They're generally 70 feet and have 9.5 or 10-foot side setbacks. And to the east with the R4A zoning, you can see that in that situation, you have roughly 60-foot lots that are approximately 8,000 square feet in size with reduced setbacks as well. So the R5A zoning with 10,000 square foot lots and 75-foot lot width actually does fit this existing character better than the existing R4 zoning would.
Yeah, Mark,
Yes.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
I understood that, and I thank you for putting all that into the report that we got. And I guess this is kind of, it's a little off base, but what do you think the reason was that the lots that are there now were non-conforming to the R4? Do you think it's because the R4 came in after the fact and the size was changed? Do you think they were something else prior? You know, how did we end up with R4 not conforming to R4?
Yeah, because I mean, just to follow up real quick, I mean, it's really not R4, right? I mean, that's what we're saying.
Technically, from the report, while some, there's a few that do.
Yeah.
But some, for the most part, to Mark's point, and to, I think it was Jamie's in the report, it is more R5A than it is R4 ever, for the most part.
When I moved in and bought my lot, it was 70 foot was normal size lot.
That was the R4 zone, okay.
That was 1990.
So we
Pardon me, 1988.
essentially, we redefined R4 then.
At one time it was 60, then it went to 70, then it went to 80, then it went to 90.
Okay.
Go ahead,
I
Mark.
wasn't aware of that history, and that's great. Because typically my thought would be, over the last couple of decades, maybe it was approved as a PUD or something, which it's not. I don't know specifically when that subdivision was platted, but to the other point that, yeah, apparently the code has changed over the several decades preceding.
Yeah, okay. Well, all those homes have been there since I was a kid.
Yeah, but I guess for me, it's semantics because if I'm a resident there, I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I have R4. Why don't they fit R4? But it's really not R4 under our definition today. Is that correct? It's really not current R4, the houses to the south.
The houses to the south would, if that was vacant land and a developer was coming in for that subdivision, they would not be allowed to do that by right. They would need to come through and seek approval for variations or for a plan unit development.
And I guess for me, it's just semantics. It's really not R4. It's not R4 2020, 2021. It's basically, if you look at if I'm going by this drawing here, which thanks a lot, this kind of lays it out. It looks like the width of the lots are nowhere near what R4 is today. Is that correct?
Yeah, because it would have 90-foot lot widths, and you can see those are 70.
Those are what?
70.
70. And what are the proposed ones to the north in the development?
75.
The 75 is the narrow. They're actually, the code is 75 as proposed. The narrowest lot is actually 78.
Okay. So they're okay. Got it.
And the ones, Mark, looking, I guess it's to the east there, those are also the same nature. Granted, there's some maybe to the west or to the north that are different, but the ones right there to the east across Walter Street, those are also, they look very similar to the ones to the south.
Correct. And in fact, immediately to the east, you have the R4A zoning district, which is
Okay.
even older lots.
Oh, I see the square footage up there now. Okay.
Which ones?
The orange, the top,
like 8,000 roughly, 7,900, something like that, it says.
Yeah, I went through to see if we had plats of survey on file and kind of just spot checked. So that one immediately to the east and sort of the more orangish color for the R4A is a 60-foot lot width and 7950 square foot.
We're at 10 and 12.5 on R5A and the R4.
so Mark, I think going back to what you originally said, this is an infill type of project, 9 homes in a current subdivision. One of the main things is we have to make sure that it is quote unquote in line with the other houses and buildings around there. Is that correct?
That's certainly a significant factor, yes.
So one thing just to point out is that while they don't meet the width, they do meet the square footage on the other side of the street. So they exceeded square footage on the lot size.
Yeah,
So what they did is,
Depth.
but by the depth is about 1 inch. So what they did is if this was an R4,
Yes.
they went in and offset the width, which we've done. I mean, even Fordham has that as well. They offset the width by the depth and it increased the square footage on those lots. So those lots are about 14,000 square feet. These are going to be 10. Roughly.
With open space and no development.
With the
I know.
open space. Yeah. I mean, I'm just talking about that. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
Right, no,
you asked about the R5 versus the R4.
yeah.
So to me, that's the big difference is it's 10,000 square foot versus 14. Even the ones I guess that would be, I don't know, to the left.
It'd be to the west.
Others are the 90.
Yeah, but basically if they would not be able to build, the houses around there would not be able to build R4 today without some sort of variance.
Well, they would. I mean, they wouldn't be able to build that many houses. All they have to do is cut down on one of the lots and then they can widen it to get the 12,500 square feet with your side setbacks. They wouldn't do it with this number of it, yeah.
So basically they would need a variance or a PUD.
Yeah, they're non-conforming R4.
They have to do a PUD anyway because of
No, I'm saying that if I'm a house to the south, one of the first things I would say is, whoa, I'm R4. Why shouldn't they build R4? But they're really not R4.
Yeah, they're legally non-conforming lots.
Yeah.
So is there a problem with this? I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
I think it was just.
Yeah. So also had this request on our May 5 Planning and Zoning Commission. We had significant attendance and a number of comments from the public. Just kind of highlighted some of the main discussion items. The primary one was from stormwater. Actually backing up on this screen on the south lot, but kind of where I have that R4 chart is a detention area. And there is a lot of concern about the stormwater flow through from the south moving to the north through this area and what potential impact that might have with this development and how that could affect surrounding property owners from a stormwater management perspective. And then related to that, some issues related to grading, wildlife. There was some comments about density. There was discussion about the various approval process and also specifically as it relates to the zoning, as I noted earlier, to just make it clear, the R5A, because there was some concern about potentially having duplexes or townhomes here. The zoning does not allow for townhomes and duplexes would need to come through as a special use, which is not what we're discussing tonight. And then there was some comment with a neighbor to the northeast regarding the extension of the sewer line and what potential impact that may have on their property. So the Planning and Zoning Committee did make a 5-0 unanimous recommendation with 1 abstention on this request for the rezoning and final plat based on staff's comments, which are minimal and kind of just our general comments regarding addressing comments from our various consultants. So the applicant is present today, I believe, with a number of folks on his team, and I can also answer any further questions that you may have.
Mark, what was the issue with, and we were out there again today, I was with Ken. So the stormwater runs from the north, if you go back to that previous picture. So I believe there's a detention to the southeast kitty corner of this, is that correct?
The main detention in the area is to the southwest, again, sort of where,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought there's a detention right there on the southeast kitty corner. That does not flow into it?
you know what, it might. I know the applicant, I believe they have some folks with some more engineering knowledge. They may be able to better respond to.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at, what's the issue with the water overflow? That's what I'd like to hear. We weren't at planning and zoning.
Yeah, the issue that the neighbors expressed was in heavy rainfall events, these stormwater areas being pretty inundated, and just kind of a concern, they flow into this area and you're going to develop it and grade it. So it's the normal concern, justifiable. If I lived in the area, I everyone would want to make sure that changes to the area don't result in the stormwater now going onto their property, right? So, per law, the developer needs to still take in all the stormwater that they're already taking and manage it, which they will be doing.
So the point, Mark, is they're concerned about what this might bring, not that there's an existing problem.
Well, and one of the neighbors did provide even a video and of a relatively recent significant storm event, and there's a significant amount of water that was identified. And again, I don't believe anybody's, and I could be incorrect about this, I don't believe anybody's homes actually flooded, but significant amount of water in the detention areas beyond what you would normally expect, and possibly on the road some. So yeah, given that, and the fact that it probably occurs once or twice a year or so, obviously raised some concerns about how this development might impact that.
Wouldn't engineering make it better, Mark, or?
I'm not an engineer, but you do have, this is a natural, it's this area basically hasn't been touched, right? So putting in an additional detention area, which they would be, and I'm going to actually move forward a bit here to their grading plan. So behind lots 3 and 4, you can see they are putting in a detention area, and in addition, putting in some rain gardens. So doing that engineering ideally would actually help. My understanding from talking to engineers is you don't necessarily want to specifically state that. They have to take the stormwater that the property is currently getting and manage it. And their engineers are designing this to do that. Our village engineer has reviewed the plans and doesn't have any serious concerns about this at this time. And of course, this would have to go to MWRD. They're the body that sort of regulates stormwater in Cook County, and the developer would need approval from MWRD related to the stormwater in order to develop the property.
So Mark, if I live there, the last thing I want is to make sure that I want assurances that there's not going to be additional, impact with stormwater. And what you're saying is that we ensure that by engineers have to sign off on it and engineer it accordingly, and B, MWRD looks at that work and they have to sign off on it as well. That gives the assurances. Like, for instance, if I was a homeowner there, to ensure that I don't have additional stormwater runoff. Is that the process?
That is the process. That's correct, sir.
Okay.
And we do have some residents with their hands up. You want to go?
Yeah. Let's absolutely.
One thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I'm okay with it. My only concern is 5A, it is a special use for townhomes. And I really am pretty adamant that this should not be townhomes in here. So, if we did this, I would love to be able to put something in there that says the special use is not an option for this PUD. So they couldn't come back So they could come back on a special use on it.
To just be clear, it's not a PUD request. It's a rezoning and final subdivision plat. And
Okay, so
townhomes are prohibited.
Goes back in front of us.
Townhomes are prohibited.
I thought townhomes are.
Duplexes are.
Duplexes are allowed as a special use.
Okay.
So it would have to go through this process again. Plus, they would need a whole new plat. You can't fit duplexes on, these lots. So we are tying the rezoning to the subdivision plat. But townhomes are specifically prohibited in the R5A, and duplexes require going through the process again with a public hearing with planning and zoning and coming to the village board for special use approval.
Right, so I understand that. So if they come through and they have to readjust these lot sizes, do they lose the rezoning, or they keep the rezoning, they can just do a replat?
They would just do a replat.
Right, so I was just wondering, in the conditions for us to allow them to change, can we just exclude duplexes from those conditions? So that way they have to go back to R4 to reconsider R5A with towns. Because what happens is people come in and say, well, it's already R5A and it's really a special use, so it's actually okay to do duplexes.
Yeah, it's generally difficult. Normally conditions are put in place with special uses. And again, there is no special use request here. One could, follow up and see if it's appropriate to put that writing in a rezoning ordinance. But again, that's
what I'm saying.
If someone's coming in with duplexes, going through a special use process, part of that evaluation is through our comprehensive plan. And our comprehensive plan has this as infill development needing to fit the character of the neighborhood. And so does the Planning and Zoning Commission, or does the board feel duplexes are appropriate in this area? And based on the feedback, it seems like, no, they're not appropriate in this area. So it would just get denied.
So is there anything wrong with putting it in then on the rezoning?
It's, whether or not it's appropriate to condition a rezoning ordinance is more of a legal question.
Okay.
We can look into that.
That's all I'm asking.
Another thing too.
They're not asking for it anyway, so it shouldn't matter as long as it's okay.
Well, the other thing would be potentially the permitting it only last a year. So if the single family detached weren't moving forward, that would expire.
Yeah.
But it would still stay R5A.
I understand the zoning's not going to expire. I understand that. But
I think that might be a more actually appropriate avenue, because we have conditioned, we have conditioned rezoning ordinances before, at least before my time. I've seen these ordinances
Give
where
them R5A
maybe
without
you
building
do
in a year.
zoning reversion if the development doesn't occur.
Might get into a due process issue. I mean, as a property owner in the future has a right to ask for a special use for his own property, right? So how can you tell people they can't, I guess, but that's
And you wouldn't be able to say, hey, you can't revert it. Once you give them R5A, you can't revert back, right? So you wouldn't be able to say, hey, we'll give you the option for 1 year to be R5A as long as you build. You can't do that, correct?
So can I put in the ability to not have a special use, to not?
It's going in front of us anyway. Dave, I think everyone agrees with you.
there's like 3 levels of protection.
I'm just saying, you guys know my concern, right?
A future board may approve it.
Well, it's a 5A and it's for me to go from a 5A to allow for a special use is a lot different than me going from a 4 to a 5A with the special use. It's already 5A. Duplexes are allowed in 5A, so what's the big deal if I want to just change my plan on here on a 5A?
I see where you're coming from.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, got it.
But you guys always have an extra labor of
Yeah,
practice.
let's hear from the residents.
So I got 3, and Sue Meeks did reach out prior, so I'll have her go first, then Laura Whittingham, and then Jeanette Tavares. So Sue, you're up. I might have surprised you there, so I will. Go ahead, Sue, you there?
She's on mute.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah. Hi, Sue.
Okay. So I do have some concerns. I am at 18 West Roberta, so I am right across from lot number 1. And a majority of our concerns is the water. We do have a lot of water. We have had a driveway that has washed away 2 houses down from me. The street, it doesn't have to be the 100-year rain. There is a lot of water. Our backyards, how the water comes down, even in my backyard, and I'm high, it's a puddle back there for many days. So whether it wasn't rezoned years ago when this is done, I'm not sure. So our main concern is how this water is going to flow. And everybody keeps saying it's going to be okay. We're building this retention pond. My other concern is you really haven't given any reason why this has to be zoned as an R5A. It can stay as an R4. We were in R4 however many years ago. We don't conform to it now. These lots can stay in R4, leave the density that we as residents here would like to keep the water flowing correctly. There's no reason that this has to be an R5A. There's no hardship. That's the other concern. We need the density. The other thing is, I was looking through the big long report. What does Public Works have to say about the retention area that is next to me and the one that is kitty corner down by, is that Walter? You know, how is that going to continually flow? They both flow through there. So I didn't see much about what Public Works is saying on that. And I do, if you are going to keep this as a 5A, I like how Dave is saying we should have something in there that you can't put duplexes in. There could be another board that comes in that doesn't conform with us, but it also doesn't give us any reassurance that it can't happen. So those were my concerns. And then my last concern is you're hearing lots of things. He's building, there's going to be houses, there are going to be walkouts, they're going to be, you know, that's fine. We're not saying we don't want development there. We want it done the right way, and there's no reason it can't stay in R4. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. So just so I understand the whole water issue, because my understanding is that, and this is where the engineers or the applicant has to comment on this. How does the water flow right now? Because my understanding, does it not flow from south to north? And how is this going to actually, I mean, will this make things better or worse?
That's what they were talking about, cleaning up.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor Phil Cullen here.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah, and you know, so, you know, there's some concerns out there. And talking about this detention pond with Sue and Sue's husband, that pond that is on the south side of the street and the one that's on the north or the southeast corner of the intersection of Roberta and Walter, that passes through this project. We are not changing the restrictors. We are attaching a pipe. Everything's going to continue to flow through. So I think before people get in and they've got questions that the village board understandably doesn't have the answers for, I've got Dave Johnson, my engineer here. I have with me Carl Peterson, who is my ecologist and a certified tree arborist. And we've all worked with the Army Corps of Engineers for 16 months on this project. We have, and just for your information, the water is running from the south, it flows to the north. We have a series of detention ponds, rain gardens on here. We're leaving 3 of the 5 acres is undisturbed, okay? So the ordinance, for the most part, if you look at your comprehensive plan for conservation area infill, it allows you the same amount of lots as an R4, which is 2 per acre if it's 90 feet or 12,500. So under your conservation overlay in your comprehensive plan, we could have put 10 or 11 lots on this property. We chose to put 9. The law allows us, we don't have to correct any issues, which there isn't any out there, and we're not going to create any. What it's saying is any unrestricted flow off of these areas, we cannot release any more water than that is being released right now. So when we create these impervious areas on these 9 lots, we have to provide detention for it. The detention calculations have been made. Were submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers. We decided to go to the federal government first rather than last, so we can come in with a presentation that has been approved by the federal government. After this, and Jim Kankar has reviewed this, he certainly has to see the same stormwater calculations that we're going to provide to the MWRD. But all this water flows through. We understand. I was out on the night of, in May last summer, early summer, about a year ago right now on a Sunday night when we had 100-year storm event. And I looked at this property and every other detention pond in Lamont, and they all function the way they're designed to function for a 100-year storm event. So, before you take any other questions from the audience, I would like to have Carl Peterson, who's the ecologist and the arborist, give a little presentation of what we're doing here. We have had the village arborist out to the site. There's a lot of dangerous conditions in there that, this forest has been blighted by ash borer. There's a lot of disease in there. There's a lot of dead trees. We have come up with an enhancement plan to restore this forest on this property. So I would just like to have a situation that typically on the committee of whole, it goes to village board discussion, and then it goes to the developer, the applicant, before you open it up for public discussion. So maybe we can circumvent some of these questions and concerns by doing our presentation first.
Phil, real quick, before, or, maybe this is just a prelude, something he can address. So Sue brought up an issue because Sue lives to the south. You're saying the water flows from south to north, which is what my understanding was. She mentioned a specific issue of a driveway. So how will this impact the residents to the south? And if you're saying it's not, what issue is she referring to as far as a driveway getting rinsed out? I just, will this impact anything to the, residents to the south?
No, well, Sue lives on, just east of the detention pond on the south side of the street.
Right.
And what that detention pond does, Mark.
It's everyone else that's having it.
And what happens is that detention pond, there's a restrictor in that pond. And it restricts the flow of the water out. And what happens if the rainfall is greater than the amount that can go through the restrictor, that's what backs up the water in the ponds. Halfway up that hill, there's a flared end section with a 24-inch pipe. That's the overflow. That pond does not go over and top off and go over the road. It goes through this overflow. It goes over to a manhole. It bypasses the restrictor and drops down. And then it's going to go under the street. We're going to make a connection and we're going to extend the storm sewer. So there's no impact from our side of what we're doing to that detention pond. All we're doing, John, is we're putting a couple more pipes on it so it flows a little bit further down to the north so we can go in and reconstruct lots 1, 2, and 3, which need to be reconstructed. So, but that's what that's about. Now, as I said, I would like to have Carl, and you can ask any questions regarding any of the ecology of how this works. We've had ecologists out there. We've had archaeologists out there. We have turned over every rock in that 5-acre parcel.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to go to the
Look
federal
for
government.
artifacts.
Oh yeah, no, they look for a lot of interesting things, which Carl can get into. But this is, like I said, this is why we brought it to the Army Corps first. We knew we were going to meet the requirements of the regional permit. But if I walked in here first and showed it to you guys, and it's like, well, what are these rain gardens and what's the function of those? That's why I invited Carl and said, hey, come on back on, who was at the public hearing as well. Okay. And he can explain the process of what we're doing here. So if you have any questions, you want him to give you a 3 to 5 minute presentation, and then we'll go get back into the questions.
That's fine.
Okay, Carol, you got the floor.
Mark, could I please share my screen?
Yeah. George, you might need to give him permission to do that. Oh, never mind.
Can you guys see this? I think it's working.
Yes.
Yep, we got you.
So you see like a location map?
Yeah.
Okay. So we all know where it is. Mark covered a lot of this already. But what I wanted to show you on these water resource maps was, this is the main flow path. And there is a channel that goes through here that is semi-permanent. It's soggy all the time. And there are dry areas. I'll show you some pictures later. But essentially, the water from the southwest detention area comes on normal circumstances, comes through a culvert and feeds this little drainage way.
Southeast.
Southeast, thank you. Sorry about that. And this is a soil map. I mean, it's non-hydric soils. The soil map also shows like some historic version of this channel. It looks like it maybe used to cut through here. Same thing with the USGS map, shows that channel coming through, going into this pond and going on. And as far as, here's an aerial that shows a little bit more of what's happening here. So as far as our site goes, you have the southeast pond, which is a turf pond with a cement low flow channel. And then you have the southwest pond, I'll call it, or the south pond, I guess, which is also a turf pond with a cement overflow. And the water bounces up and down in those and shoots through pipes under the road into here. And then the two areas converge right at about this, where you see this white spot. That's a bunch of riprap with another inlet, and it kind of a spillway into this pond. And then it goes through a channel there and up here to another pond, and then comes around and ultimately goes into another pond and then out into the INM canal. And so this really is a historic stream that used to travel through here. And over time, with development, detention areas have been put on it. And this is kind of what's left, at least in the area. I mean, between the ponds, that channel picks up here and there, but it's essentially what's left. And this site is interesting because, it's been vacant for a long time. It has this creek that goes through it. It attracts kids, and there's a lot of, homemade things going on that site. But it's got some topography, it's got some interest. And so the idea, this aerial is just the overlay of the engineering on an aerial that shows the trees and everything that's going on here. And so that channel is coming through here, and it really winds around in here, and it comes up and goes into this structure and into the pond to the north. And then right now, the southwest pond that you can see a little bit here in the corner comes under the street and goes into, it has really formed this big eroded gully that basically cuts through here and comes out, connects with that, and goes under the structure and into the street. Now, this west pond almost never has, I shouldn't say never, but it only has water when this dry detention basin is got water flowing in it. And so we went to Corps of Engineers to get a JD, and the Corps of Engineers said, hey, this one is not jurisdictional. That's basically an eroded gully, and go see the MWRD about it. But this one is it is under Corps of Engineers jurisdiction.
A navigable waterway.
So they're both essentially eroded gullies, so to speak. But, you know, Lamont's got a lot of ravines and stuff like that. This resembles some of the nicer areas. And we wanted to enhance it instead of just digging. You know, we could have dug a hole up here in outlot B and a hole up here in outlot C and made these lots a little bit longer and not had any water quality stuff upstream and been R4. And we probably could have got a permit to do that because we would have been able to, you know, squeeze the buffers and really kind of, you know, mess around. But we, you know, the owner, Gavin Thomas and Phil, who's done a lot of work with me over the years and through this, has said, you know, let's try to do something nice so that this whole area that is not lots can be enjoyed by the residents there. And, you know, something that they can sit out and look at with the, basically the nature is in their backyard, but not all the way up to their backyard. And so that was the concept for the plan. And so the drainage that is front and center here, I guess I want to go back to this aerial for a second. You know, Dave Johnson can speak to this better, but I'm going to just show some of his calculations real quick on how this thing works. The highest that the water ever gets, the peak elevation, this is the 2-year rainfall, but he goes all the way up, and the highest elevation is, I want to say it's 706, and that's represented in this line that comes around and out. That's not a grading line. That's the high water line. And same thing over here. And so under normal flow events, this channel operates like it always has, conveying water like it always has. And then at the high flow events, it comes up to about 706. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but that 706 is about 2 feet above the stream banks. And so if you think about it, it's like you're creating this floodplain riparian habitat that gets wet from time to time and draws back down. And according to the hydrology calculations, that draws down in about, it comes back down to 0 in 72 hours, which is 3 days, but comes that last foot relatively quickly. In 1 day, it comes to only a foot deep, and then that lasts for 55 hours, which is about 2 more days of that foot slowly drawing down. And so because of that design from a stormwater standpoint, we came up with this enhancement plan in these areas where we have some flooding up to the 706. And I don't want to say flooding in a like this bad way, because I mean, these lots are all the way up at 723. The road is way higher than that. So our high water is many feet below anything to the south. And so we're planting this, we're doing this according to the Corps of Engineers program, because the Corps of Engineers does not automatically approve ponds like the one to the north where it was dug into a stream. In fact, that's almost not allowed. And so we're not digging into the stream, we're we're installing a berm and a restrictor up here at the north that lets us back up within a reasonable method, and we're enhancing that area with the vegetation. And the other, and we're working with the village forester, Chuck Stewart, who is kind of, you know, someone I really look up to. I mean, he's been around a long time. If you know him, you know what I mean. And he's working with us on how best to preserve and enhance the woodland. So this, all of the, you know, the entire area, I guess if I could just take some liberty here, you know, all of this, you know, where the lots are not here, I mean, all of this part of the site is really going to function as one natural area that these residents can enjoy. And then they have their lot line is right here. And then there's going to be a turf swale that's conveying water from these lots into this little rain garden. And that's going to, it's got a pipe right in the middle of it, a drain, that when that water reaches a couple of inches, it's going to come down into the stream. It will be filtered into the stream, come off and go out. And there's a similar grass swale behind the 3 lots here that will be conveyed down to the stream, come into our enhanced vegetation area where we do have hydrology that works. I mean, and right now this stream does go up and down, and we're in a very similar hydraulic model to what's happening naturally. And that's why the Corps of Engineers gave us a permit, because normally stormwater management and streams don't go hand in hand. The fact that, you know, this is really water coming from the detention pond going to is why it was approved. And I just want to show, there was some talk at the beginning of the public hearing about that's the Corps of Engineers letter. This is their map, jurisdictional. This 325 square foot wetland was jurisdictional, and this was considered to be non-jurisdictional. This is what the stream looks like. We stake the ordinary high water mark. That's the blue lines you see. So, you know, you can see that the stream goes up and down, but in general, this is what it looks like. Here it is exiting the property under the fence and going into the bridge structure there. Here it is coming onto the property from the southwest pond onto the property. Here's it continuing. You know, we've got some cleanup to do there, and I believe that the property owners already started on the cleanup. Here's one area of the woodlands that we are preserving and enhancing, young, healthy trees. When Phil mentioned that there were some hazards, there are some, you know, there's dead ash. There's a lot of trees that are dead. They've been painted, and the plan would be to remove those, open this up a little bit, and you know, do some woodland enhancement. As far as impact, you know, our berm is coming in up here, and you can see the engineering plans a little bit later. And then this part between lot 1 and 2, right now that culvert ends right there where my plus sign is. And it's got this really deep gully that comes out here, flattens out, and goes through there. And what's going to happen is this pipe's going to be extended, come through these 2 lots. I think it goes through lot 2, and then exit into the stream as it naturally does, or the gully. So we do have the engineering plans that I think you guys have looked at the last time, and this is essentially, yeah, it comes in between lot 1 and 2, comes back and opens up. And again, these are the limits of ponding, the 706 that I've been talking about. Then it gets picked up by these restrictor pipes and can go further on, you know, to the next pond. So in general, that's what's going on. There was, And I just want to show a little bit excerpts from these reports. The Corps asked us to do a rapid assessment of the stream. I sent a couple biologists out here. I think this couch is gone. But there are some nicer portions of the stream where there's, natural bed and bank going on. And we had people go out and look for macroinvertebrates and worms and snails and the types of, small things that you'd find in streams and high quality streams. And portions of this turned out to be, fairly moderate, but without, looking under every rock and everything, you can see that this area needs some attention and some enhancement. And so when we talk about, is it going to make it better for the people of the South? I'm not sure, but I got to think that getting all this stuff removed and having this cleaned up is going to be better for the whole neighborhood. But as far as solving drainage issues upstream, and we have to accept all the water that's coming from upstream onto our site. And I think we've done it in a pretty creative and thoughtful way, frankly. And then this is our restoration plan, which has been approved by the Corps of Engineers. We've gone through a couple of rounds of comments with consultants from the village of Lamont. And I think we're really, at the end of the day, when we get through the comments and everything, we're going to have a very solid plan that, will meet Corps of Engineers, NWRD, and Village of Lamont standards. And that's in a nutshell. That's my presentation. Thanks for sitting through that. I don't think I feel like I left out a lot of stuff. I went kind of fast. I'm definitely ready to answer any questions if there are any.
Go, just two quick points. You said that at the beginning, hey, we could make this work and put it in R4 as is and not go for the R5A change. It's probably not going to change the lots, but it would be some maneuvering. So basically, the density will not change even if you kept it at R4, or did I understand that correctly?
That's right. The width, we're very close on the width, especially to everything in the neighborhood. It would be depth that would. Got it.
So I guess the density, it would be the same if it was R4 or R5A. Is that correct?
Really, yeah. If you look at density for the site, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Second question. I know water flows downhill, but if you put in R4, R5A, is there going to be any impact negatively to the residents to the south?
No, there shouldn't be any negative impact. We have to take all their water, and we're, instead of filling in a part of this and trying to force it into a large detention area, we're leaving this, all of this topography is, I've looked at this like you guys could see it, but all that topography is preserved.
Okay.
So even if it was plugged up at the end of this, you've got several feet of water to figure out that it's plugged and unplug it before it's going to impact the people to the south.
Okay, so, and I know, Carl, you'll say that because you might have a vested interest, but this has to clear all the engineers, so that's what I'm more concerned about.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely. Doesn't matter what.
last question. So how about the resident, to me, it's the residents to the north that could be impacted by this the most. What is the issues or the, outside of, hey, we're going to have all these engineers look at it, was there any feedback at all or any input from residents to the north?
Well, from the last public hearing, the residents from the north, some were pro, some were against. There's concern about unauthorized use of the woods. And then there's concern about, well, what happens to as you build these lots, right, that creates runoff that goes south. And the whole point of having the restrictor is to slow that water so that this is what engineers figure out is they cannot release that water at a higher rate than what's being released at now.
Okay.
So downstream, as far as flow rates go, it'll actually be a little bit, it'll be a little bit more restricted. It'll be a slower flow rate, but the same amount of water will ultimately get there. It's going to be just a little bit slower.
Got it. Okay, Carl, thanks. Any other questions or comments from the trustees? You want to get to the residents, back to the residents, George?
Yeah, I'll go to Laura Whittingham. Go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we got you.
Hi. Thanks so much for your time. I am at 1100 Hermes Avenue. So I'm the lot that's just to the north that everything kind of flows into. So that white structure that he was pointing to on the map it's actually a bridge. So I have two large culverts and then the bridge getting up to my house. So obviously I am in favor of the development. I think it's going to be nice. And there is a lot of garbage in that woods that ultimately comes through into my creek and it's a mess all the time. So I think it'll be nice. I just worry about water flow, which I know I voiced at the last meeting. And I sent some video into Mark, and I don't know if you're able to view any of that, but it was the storm last year. The water was up to the top of my culverts, and actually there's some, I don't know if they're called weep holes or what they are in my bridge they were coming over the bridge to a small degree. It was a huge violent rush of water that ultimately goes over the berm on the north side of my pond and then down into the Buffett Harbor retention pond, and it washed out the east wall of that pond last year. So in fact, I got some pictures last week. The village spent 4 days rebuilding the wall of that retention pond in Buffett Harbor because the village had taken that property over. So that was just taxpayer money on that repair. But in the case of my pond, it's privately owned and it has an easement for stormwater to rise and fall at a set amount. And I have a fence and the bridge and the culverts, all of that's been obviously approved by the village before it was built, and the Army Corps had involvement with that and everything. But it's worked perfectly fine. And my worry is, since it is private property, the fence, the bridge, the culverts, who has the responsibility when this is all said and done if these things start to go south and my fence gets washed out or my bridge gets washed out, because then there's no access to my house, and that's a safety issue as well. So I just hope there's a lot of consideration being put in the amount of water flow. I mean, I know the engineers do their thing and they're qualified, but at the end of the day, if it does happen, who's responsible for this, and who maintains the outlots or the wetlands after the project is over and the developers and the builders are gone? Who's going to maintain those open areas? Oftentimes, many years I have heavy windstorms and the tree will come down and break the fence. And in the past, I've gotten a hold of the landowner and they very nicely come out, take the tree down and pay to have my fence repaired. But it doesn't sound like the homeowners in the future will be involved with the outlots. So that's my question about maintaining the outlots. And then my other question would be about who has the responsibility if the water flow is increased and there is damage to the things to the north on my property.
Thanks, Laura.
Hey, Mayor, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Let me jump in on this one at a time. So, I've looked at Laura Whittingham and I've seen the videos of that water as well. And she gets a substantial amount of damage to her fence when these dying and diseased trees keep falling into it. This property is not getting, this pond in this open space and conservation easement is not getting dedicated to the Village of Lamont. There's a homeowners association being set up. There's going to be monthly fees and assessments to maintain that and have Carl's company come out in the spring, in the fall every year to check the restrictors, make sure there's no leaves in it. So when we go through this enhancement program, if you look at the pictures that she sent Mark, she's got a couple of trees that fell through her fence. And that's the problem out there with so much disease. One thing Chuck Stewart, the arborist that walked that property with us, says, get it all down. Anything that's diseased, this airborne disease is not over. If you saw a big article in the Tribune 3 weeks ago, there's issues. So between your arborist and my arborist, and actually I have another arborist at Homer Tree Service, we're going to go in there and we're going to get rid of all the diseased and dead brush in there. So the concern is it's going to be properly maintained. We're enhancing it with all the wetland flowers and everything based on what the Corps approved. So I don't think there should be any concern about that, and we're going to have a 100-year storm. Our pond is going to top over just like the one does Laura's in Fire Rock Farm, which did last May, Cam Forces and Buffett Harbor, because they all go over. Because you can't feasibly, it's not economically feasible to accommodate all this water. So it ultimately works its way down through Timberline in the Ingham Canal. So the question for Whittingham is who's going to be responsible? Well, there's a homeowners association. So, and to correct one thing is I think Ashley Johnson is still online. She's downstream as well. Those Laura and Ashley, or it was Dave that night, Dave Johnson, they like the idea that we were doing this project. And they're downstream. They're not north on the other side on Roberta and Wend, which is 6 feet higher than us. So anyway.
I'm having trouble hearing. You keep cutting out. Is anybody else having that difficulty?
I don't know why.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
No, we are too. I think we got the gist of it, or do you need more from?
No, I think I got the gist of it, Phil, but I don't know if you're, but to Laura's point, again, I just drove out there. I don't know if Dave is lower or higher than Laura, but Laura is.
He's higher. He's much higher.
Yeah. And so Laura, you're immediately north of there. So all the water is going to come in there. To me, if right now, if there's been past problems, if nothing happened, whatever past problems you had would continue to happen. Will this development make it better? That's the question I have if I'm in Laura's house.
Well, okay, I think we lost Phil there, maybe, I don't know, but,
No, I don't know what's going on here, guys.
okay, so as far as better goes, the flows that are coming off this property are going to be restricted and released at a lower rate than what was, previously approved. Like it seems like as more time goes on, the stormwater regulations get tighter and tighter. And so the ponds that are coming onto this property right now are releasing at a higher rate than what this area will be releasing at, just because of the timing of when things were approved. I mean, I think based on aerials that I've seen, that the stuff to the south was built in the maybe the late 80s, and then the pond to the north has been in existence for quite a while. I think that may have been the same time period, but definitely pre-93, which was the latest era I looked at up there. And so I hate to promise or say anything like, oh yeah, it's going to be better, but those flows will be restricted and slower than what they are now coming off of the property.
It's not allowed to be any worse.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else? I did have one more hand. I don't know, Jeanette, do you still want to speak? If not, we will. Anything else from the board?
You know, as the new kid here, I have listened to 11 years of board meetings, and it seems like every subdivision that comes into town, it's all about stormwater runoff flooding. And it seems to me, this is what this is about here too, and generally, but it comes down to the engineers. You either believe them or you don't. And, you know, who else can we go by, right?
And that's right. I was,
Can't stop a 150-year flood from going over a 100-year restriction. That's not going to happen. That's why it's called 100 years. Occasionally, you'll have one that's bigger.
got it. Is Jeanette, is she still on?
She is, she's muted though. She might have stepped away.
I don't know, but by now we can move into the homes that Phil's going to be building on this. They ought to be better, go in tomorrow morning.
All right.
No, and I think we've been through a couple of these with Phil. And Phil, I know you did a lot of homework on this one. We appreciate that, going to the Army Corps first, not getting preliminary plat and then having to go back. And
Right.
you've done a lot of homework, and you guys have engineers on the job. So I think that's a good first step.
Okay.
Moving this forward.
All right. Sounds good. Any other questions, comments on this, trustees?
No, it's fine.
Okay. All right. Next up, any unfinished or new business?
Anything from the board before I turn it over to the public?
All right. Go ahead, George. Take audience
So we
participation.
do have, this is the opportunity where if you want to speak, you've had an opportunity to send in comments, calls prior to the meeting. But this is another opportunity where you can speak. So before we move on to the next part of the meeting, I will open it up here momentarily. And if anybody has any comment, just please raise your hand virtually. Not seeing any? I do have one. Oh, Jeanette, you're back. See your hand, Jeanette. Go ahead.
Yeah. She's muted, looks like.
I will ask you to unmute. Jeanette? Bueller? Jeanette? No, I think
She have to star 6 or something, or?
oh, here we go. She might, no, we'll, I'm sure we'll have her at another meeting. Can't figure out, no, I think we're good to go, Mr. Mayor. She could have just been an inadvertent raising of the hand, but
Okay.
I will ask you to unmute one more time. I'll give you one more shot, Jeanette. Feel free to reach out to myself, Mark, or Jason after the meeting. We can get your question addressed.
Okay. All right. Next up, executive session.
I did have, like for a motion to move an executive session for, two items, although we'll put them together really quick. 2C1, performance of an employee, and then, 2C5, real estate.
I think Jeanette is trying to talk.
Jeanette, I got you. You're no longer muted. Come on, Jeanette.
All right, can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, I only had one question for the engineers and all the people that have been talking tonight. And that is on the homes that you're planning there on the lots. I'm wondering if anybody has done a soil boring to see what you've got to build on? Because with all that water and everything that you have there, it would be probably a very good idea to find out what's there before you start.
Non-hydric soil.
It's, pardon what?
I think he did mention that it was non-hydric soil. They did do that.
They did do that. Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
All right, thanks, Jeanette.
Thanks, Jeanette. All right.
Need a motion?
Motion.
So moved.
Okay, got a motion by trustee Maher, seconded by
Second.
trustee McClafferty. That ends our public meeting, committee of the whole for today. Thanks for everyone for hanging in there and joining us. Have a great week. Appreciate it. We are officially adjourned at